Hi, I'm Clara, and this is the Practice with Clara podcast, where we dive into philosophy and all things yoga related, which has been my passion for the last 20 years. This week's episode is about travel, the shift in perspective that we gain from it, poses to do after travel, and a couple of my hacks that I've learned on the road. I hope you enjoy the episode, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Practice with Clara podcast. You're sitting with Stephanie
And Clara.
for today's episode on the travel series. So, we're shifting out of the chakra series and spending this week all things related to travel.
Yay.
So, I thought we'd open, Clara, asking you what your relationship has been to travel this summer, considering new baby on board and some of the social distancing precautions that we're sitting in.
So just a bit of a backstory if you didn't know this about me before, but probably for the last almost 2 decades, I've been traveling probably between 3 to 6 months of the year at least. And I would say in the last year, I've really cut that down to maybe a month and a half, 2 months total. And then since having Carmen, my baby, in April, there's been zero travel. So it's been an interesting shift for me because I usually every couple of months I get back, I pack my bag and I get back on the road. So I had already planned pre-COVID to not be traveling for the next 6 or 8 months, and then I was actually supposed to start traveling again in November. I'm supposed to head over to Switzerland and teach a teacher training. But we've decided to cancel it because we just have no idea what's going to happen in terms of COVID. Yay or not yay. Is what I mean to say. So going back to this question in terms of how travel has shifted for me is that there has been zero travel. And so the only traveling I've been doing is to the office and back, where Steph is actually right now. And then also for a walk every day with Carmen and my husband Alejandro. So it's been interesting because both Alejandro and I are big travelers, and we were planning on being away all of next winter. But again, due to the pandemic, we're definitely, I think, going to be laying low and staying here. One of my favorite things about traveling is the shift of perspective, like getting out of, it's kind of like a retreat in and of itself, because when you have time away from your everyday life, you're able to reflect on the everyday life. And I have been just in the everyday life, which has been a different shift of perspective, because it almost feels like Groundhog Day for me as of right now. So that was a long story short, but that's my answer. And then Steph, how about you? You, I feel like, also had quite a bit of travel plans this summer. And
Yeah, yeah, I actually booked a flight to go to my partner's family back home in Nova Scotia, and our flights were canceled. Also planning on going away next year to somewhere warm for the holidays, and I don't think it's going to happen. So it's been interesting being a little bit more situated in the same place. I feel sometimes that I start going a little bit stir crazy. So having different things that I do to kind of break me out of the routine. And that is something, and you brought it up, Clara, in shifting the perspective, because that's something you do in your classes in terms of, you've called it moving the assemblage point, to get people to think outside of their norm, the everyday context that we get stuck in, that rut. So given that we're all in this situation, not really traveling far past the boundaries of our own province perhaps, how do you do that in your day-to-day for yourself right now? Or how do you create that type of a landscape for people with your yoga classes in terms of moving the assemblage point? And maybe explain even what that is.
yeah, so that moving the assemblage point is actually a term that Carlos Castaneda uses in the Don Juan books, the Teachings of Don Juan, one of my dad's favorite series of books. You get to listen to him on a couple of our podcasts if you haven't already. He's a very interesting man. So Carlos Castaneda writes about his experience with this shaman named Don Juan, and so they essentially he's teaching him how to be a sage. And how you do that is you have to shift your perspective so that the reality that we see that is quote unquote just black and white is shifted when so that we can see more of the gray, essentially. And you can see the magic, you can see the energy, you can see that which is not tangible. Okay, and that's shifting your assemblage point. And so I think I used that term a little while back, and what we would call that in yoga is essentially yoga, right? It would be the idea of creating a union or connecting to something that is greater than who we think we are, and that's shifting the assemblage point. So how do we do that? We do that through the practice of asana. We do that through the practice of meditation. Other ways that Don Juan talks about it is like extreme situations. So not to get dark, but like car accidents or, you know, like a big breakup, divorce, like things that essentially kind of shake your everyday, move your assemblage point. Death would be another one, birth would be another one, like witnessing either of those two things will definitely shift your assemblage point. And so, and I feel like traveling will do that, especially if you go to an area that you'd never been to before. If you've gone to a culture that's very different than your own, then I find that generally your assemblage point is shifted. So how do we do that in what I feel like I'm experiencing right now, the Groundhog Day of like not going anywhere except within, you know, 15 miles, if that, of where you live or where I live. And so I haven't been doing it as often. I haven't been able to do a practice as often just because my child is like 4 months old, and I feel like she's trying to figure herself out, as am I. And so yesterday I actually had a moment where it was like just too much. And I handed the baby over to my husband, and I sat down, closed my eyes, and I shifted my assemblage point. And how I did that is I took a lot of really deep breaths, and I envisioned my energy kind of going into the center of me and allowing everything else to dissolve around this center point so that I could remember my connection to something that is greater than myself. And I needed that in that moment because I was just feeling very frustrated and overwhelmed. Carmen's going through a growth spurt right now, so she's just very uncomfortable. So there's a lot of screaming, like sudden screaming, and my nervous system was like, so I handed over the baby. I stepped into a different room, and I like just took a moment, took some deep breaths, and allowed my awareness to actually go close, right into the center of me, and kind of allowed my body and everything else to kind of dissolve away just for a little bit. So that when I opened my eyes, I feel actually a sense of expansion, even though I'm contracting energetically. And so that would be something that you can do anytime, anywhere. So the idea of that is to slowly, just with your eyes closed, envision that you're getting smaller until you connect to your center point. And wherever that is, and a lot of martial arts traditions, it would be the one point, which is your belly button. For some people, it's the heart center. For me, it's kind of a space in between the heart and the belly button. And it's not a physical place in my body, but an energetic place, meaning I envision I'm going into kind of a dark hole. So that's the work that I'm actually doing right now in my own life. But other ways of doing it in a totally different side of the spectrum is to go outside and ideally go into a space go into a place that has a lot of open space, like a field or, right by the ocean, somewhere where there's a lot of space, and then actually allowing your eyes to get lost in up and out, meaning looking up and out. And I find that helps me, especially when I have, the blinders on and all I can see is directly what's in front of me. That allows you to expand. So 2 exercises super different from each other, but kind of doing the same thing. And then I bring the question over to you, Steph. Like, what are you doing these days that are allowing you to shift your assemblage point, meaning to shift your perspective?
Well, I think something that I realized in terms of just the last couple months and being a little bit more stationary, I guess you would say, is how I use travel as a source of inspiration and almost escapism when I'm frustrated with my current surroundings. So that's been interesting, is to kind of evaluate, like, what am I trying to move away from? Is it something that I can address and work through, or is it something that I need to let go? So it's kind of helping me examine, I guess, boundaries. And a way that I've mediated it is through reading about travel, reading stories, watching different films, and kind of tapping into a different way of traveling, and not a physical space, but more mental, going into different mental constructs that kind of take me out of whatever it is I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up the question that I'd love us both to answer is, when you travel, what are the 5 things that you bring with you always?
Cool. That's also I was going to ask you.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, this is perfect.
Okay. I'll go first so that you have a minute, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel, so I'm all about trying to minimize how much I take with me when I travel. I still carry, I feel like, quite a bit. But I'm always like, my end goal is always like, how can I have less while I travel? Because you got to lug it around with you, depending upon what kind of travel you're doing. So one of the travel hacks that I absolutely love, I haven't done it in a while, but I did it like last time I was traveling around Europe when I was teaching, is I only brought 3 colors of clothes. I brought black, white, and gray. And the reason being is that, especially, like, I always try to travel with just 7 days worth of clothes, if that. So then you do laundry all the time, but because I always want to travel with a carry-on. And so when I traveled with black, white, and gray, everything matches, because what was happening before is, like, by day 5, you're like, okay, what kind of outfit am I going to put together today? And I have to travel with yoga clothes generally, and then what I call civilian clothes, like regular clothes. So I made everything black, white, and gray. And then that way it was like outfits could be reused and everything matched. So I would say that is hack number 1 that I found really, really helpful for me. I feel like the other thing that I travel with always is I travel with what I call a travel pouch. And within that travel pouch, it's called airplane spa airplane. My airplane spa. So what I have in this travel pouch is chapstick, of course, hair elastic, and then a couple of essential oils. So Immune from Sage is one of my favorites. As soon as I get on an airplane, I mean, who knows these days, but when I used to get on an airplane, put on Immune everywhere. A, it gets rid of the smells that might be happening around you, and B, it also helps boost immunity. Right. And then another essential oil I like to put in there is one that usually is called Breathe Easy. And that one is just great for underneath the nose. Sometimes it's so dry and your nose gets so congested. This is a great one. And then earplugs, eye mask, so that you can do some sleeping, a couple of pills of melatonin so that I can pass out. I don't like sleeping on airplanes anymore because it kills my neck. But as soon as I get to wherever I'm going, I try to always travel so that I arrive somewhere at night. Is another thing. I always try to arrive at night, then I take a couple of melatonins, pass out, and hopefully, skip the jet lag. That's like the vision is, can I skip the jet lag? So those things. And then another one is a lipstick so that you can kind of freshen up, and a couple of mints. So all of those things kind of make my airplane experience a lot nicer. So I have that little pouch that I bring with me. And then I also have 2 sets of headphones. I have like noise canceling ones, and then I have little earbud ones depending upon what you're going to do. So those are the things. And then my last hack is I always bring enough snacks for like a day and a half, because I can't tell you how many times I've woken up at 4 a.m, starving wherever you are, and nothing's open, because I feel like wherever I seem to be in the world, nothing's open at 4 a.m. and you want to eat your own stomach, and you're eating like whatever's in the mini bars. So always travel with lots of snacks. So those are my things. How about you, Steph? What do you always travel with?
Snacks is one of mine. I'm taking that as well. I learned that the hard way when I went to India, and I ended up eating these weird cookies and nuts at like 4 a.m. and my stomach was upset. It was just not a good scene. So when I travel, I always buy a collection of short stories by whatever author I love. So then I have something that's pretty varied and like thick. Like I usually get a big book. I love reading, even though I use my Kobo, I love a hard book just in
Yeah, me
case
too.
you're out of service or something dies. I always have a sheet that can be used either to cover where I'm sleeping if it's like gnarly, or as a towel or at the beach, like a thin sheet that I roll up really small, good to go. So book, sheet, snacks. I have a pair of sandals that function as like really great walking shoes, but they're also chic, so they can like transition into like a nightlife scene if I need them to.
Yeah, good one.
And just in terms of dressing up, I always bring lots of jewelry because it's so easy to
Same.
kind of spice something up with like big earrings or like scrunchies, and you can kind of pack it down into like a small little pouch. I'm the same. I hate carrying a lot. And I went to London and brought so much stuff. It was awful. I was like 19, first big trip, and I'll never do that again. Whatever you can carry on your back is like the way to go.
Yes.
So those would be my top things to travel around. And I wanted to ask you, Clara, so in the travel series, which is the featured playlist this week, what are some of your go-to poses that you would either recommend to listeners to stretch out their body, or that you do for yourself as a grounding practice, or to get rid of all the kinks after being, crammed on a train or a plane for hours and hours?
I find that, especially if you check out our travel series in terms of the playlist, it's actually varied. And I gave a variety of different kinds of classes because, at least for my body, depending upon if I've been on an airplane, if I've been in a car, been in a train, or like what kind of travel I've done and how long, I actually need different things. But a couple of definite go-tos that I do, regardless of what kind of travel or how long, is usually one of the first things I do when I get somewhere is Viparita Karani. So I go to my hotel room, I put my bum on the wall, legs up the wall, and ideally it's on the bed. I move all the pillows over to the side, put my butt against the wall, legs up the wall. And the idea of that is just allowing the blood to kind of shift, because you're sitting in whatever kind of travel you're doing. And so all the blood's been kind of pooling down in the bottom of the legs. So flipping your legs upside down really helps to draw the blood. It kind of takes some of the pressure out. And especially if you've been flying for, like, I seem to always fly for at least 12 hours, it feels like. And so I get kind of very swollen in my ankles and my feet. And so that's a great way to kind of drain all of that. So Viparita Karani would be one of them. Another big one for me is always a lot of outer hip opening and hip flexor opening. So outer butt and front of the pelvis and groin area are the ones that I need to target, especially again for sitting long periods of time. So reclined spinal twist, wind release pose, ideally on a block, bolster, or whatever I've got in the hotel room, which is sometimes a couple of pillows from the couch kind of thing in terms of firmness. Pigeon pose or double pigeon, cow face would be other ones. And then I love to do some sort of heart opener. Yeah. So I usually put pillows underneath, ideally, I find a lot of hotel rooms have long, thin pillows on the couch, or those are the chamois ones for the bed. So I'll put that underneath. I'll kind of work that as a bolster, and so that I can open up my chest. And so those would definitely be some of my go-tos. The other part about the practice, at least for me, that I need is, if it's early in the morning when I land somewhere, I want to do sun salutations. I kind of want to get the blood flowing. And so that's why you'll notice some of the travel classes are a bit more flowy. And then if I'm arriving at night, I want to do more of a hatha / restorative yin kind of practice to kind of ground before I go to sleep. But I definitely try to practice as soon as I get to my hotel, just to be like, hello, body, welcome back to this, or welcome to this new time zone. What are we going to do here? And then chugging a ton of water. Yeah. And then you, Steph, is there any go-tos that you do before you, or when you arrive somewhere?
Legs up the wall. I usually need to ground just for my mental sanity after being in transit, and especially with lots of different people and things going on and interactions, to come into a space and kind of ground and close my eyes and get quiet for a minute is usually pretty key. Yeah.
Great.
So one more question in terms of our travel series for this talk. What is a habit or routine or something that you do for yourself when you're traveling to kind of land in your own rhythm or routine? Or do you kind of wipe the slate and just adapt to whatever situation that you're in?
It depends on how long I'm going to be wherever it is that I'm going to be, and whether or not I'm in a hotel or an Airbnb. So if I'm in an Airbnb, that means I'm probably going to be there for more than 3 days. I like to go grocery shopping right away. There's something that's really grounding about grocery shopping that I feel like, okay, like I'm here and this is like a regular practice that I do at home. And it's always fun to see like where people like, and I always buy breakfast things. I generally don't cook all my meals when I'm away, but I always cook breakfast because I'm very particular about what I want for breakfast. And especially these last couple of times I've been in Europe, people don't eat eggs for breakfast in a lot of places in Europe, and I need eggs every single day. First thing in the morning, eggs and veggies is like my go-to. So I've found that I usually make breakfast.
What do they eat in Europe for breakfast then?
Bread, a lot of bread.
Okay.
A lot of bread and coffee, which is like not my idea of a good time. I love bread, but I like bread a little bit later in the day. I need like some protein and some veggies first thing in the morning, and that also kind of gets things moving for me, which is really important. If I'm in a hotel room, the first thing I always do is unpack. And then the second thing I like to do is take a shower or a bath. If I have the option to take a bath, really good to be in a body of water. It's really good for your body to be in a body of water or to shower, because it helps actually alleviate some of when you move it, they say that however many time zones you move through, it takes you that many days for your body to arrive, which I think is so interesting. And a great way to kind of ground quicker is to take a shower or a bath, or to put your feet on some soil, like to put your feet on the ground. So that would be another thing to do, like go out into the park or whatever and kind of feel the actual earth.
Yeah, because you were in Europe for a whole month last summer, right? You went to...
Yes. Yeah, I've been going to Europe every year for at least a month.
And where all did you go in your trip last summer?
Oh, that was a big trip. Last summer was too intense. I traveled every 4 days, which was kind of a little too much for me. I won't do that again. I thought it was kind of exciting, but I was like, I am not 20 anymore. This is not exciting anymore. So where did I go? I went to Dublin. I went to a city outside of Dublin for a couple of days. I was in Copenhagen. I was in Barcelona. I was in the French Alps. Then I was in southern Italy and then southern France, because they're very close to each other. I was in Paris for a couple of days. I was in Scotland. I was in Edinburgh.
And was this all teaching? Because you taught at several different...
Yes, right? I taught about half those places, and the other places I just wanted to travel to. Like every time I'm in Europe, I always go to Barcelona. It's my favorite city in Europe. And so I always try to spend time there, and it's usually sunny and warm, which is also helpful. Yeah.
What do you love about Barcelona?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is the street art. I love street art. So graffiti, along with like wheat pastings and things like that. And the street art in Barcelona is amazing. It's beautiful. And I always stay in Los Ramblas, which is a super touristy part of town, but it's so beautiful because it's all these tiny little alleyways. And the food, the first time I went to Barcelona was 2002, and being a vegetarian then was kind of hard, but now it's not. There's tons of great vegetarian places and tapa places. And so, yeah, I love the food there. I love the art. Miro is one of my favorite painters, and they have a museum for him. And the museum is really cool. It's kind of up on a hill, so I always go there. The Picasso Museum, I went to last time I was there. I love Picasso, but like it's always like super packed there, so I generally don't go. And then the other part is that you can walk to the beach, Los Ramblas. Oof, I'm having a hard time. And there's a Jivamukti yoga studio, so I also went there.
Cool.
And actually ran into a friend from New York, which was kind of fun. And so there's a little bit of everything, which I like about Barcelona specifically. You, your favorite city in Europe?
Probably Berlin, but I've not.
Oh, Berlin's great. Street art
Yeah,
in Berlin's amazing.
and tons of different yoga studios. There was a ton of like Jivamukti, Iyengar, Ashtanga.
What?
Another little place that had like vinyasa hatha style. So, and then the flea markets. Like every time I
Yes.
go to Berlin, I wish I could just like shop in all their flea markets and ship it all home, but it doesn't work like that. Cool. Well, that's time for this series of the travel playlist. So thank you, Clara.
Yes. So I'm just going to put it out to the community of, I know that right now we can't travel, so we have to be patient, but we can always travel a couple of different ways. Steph said it so beautifully. Reading travel logs or reading novels about different places, I feel like is a great way to actually be somewhere else without it. Another great way is through travel shows, like Chef's Table is one of my favorites to watch, and so it takes you to different places, different foods, and what have you. And then continue to shift your perspective, even if you can't travel through, of course, you practice the obvious ones and then the ones that we just mentioned through the one. If you have any travel hacks, we love sharing those. And so if you do have any travel hacks, things that you like have changed the way that you travel, we'd love you to post them on the Practice with Clara Facebook community page. And maybe Steph will for this week, she'll post on there like travel hacks, and then we'd love to hear yours because I'm always looking for new ones. So once we get on the road, especially if you're a parent, I'd love to hear some of your parent travel hacks because this one's going to be a new one for me. Yeah. So Steph, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, and for our listeners, thanks for joining us. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Today's podcast was brought to you by the Practice with Clara app. That's mine. I've created almost 100 yoga classes for you to do at home or on the go. And they're available to you on your favorite device, including mobile, desktop, and TV. These classes include vinyasa, slow flow, hatha, restorative, yin, mantra, meditation. I also just had a baby, so I created prenatal yoga for all 4 trimesters. So head over to clararobertsoss.com/join to learn more. Or search for the Practice with Clara app at your favorite app store. There's a 7-day free trial, so no commitment. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast. We've got lots of good stuff in store for you. Until next time, namaste.